They say some children are born with stars in their eyes. Emma Carter wasn't one of them. The day she came into the world, her mother left it. Complications during childbirth, what the hospital coldly called a fatal emergency, claimed the life of the woman who was supposed to love Emma more than anyone ever would. Her first breath coincided with her mother's last. No lullaby, no skin-to-skin warmth. Just a silent nursery and a grieving father who looked at the tiny bundle not with joy but with loss. And so, from the very first moment, Emma was branded not as a miracle, but as a reminder. Growing up in a small, grey Ohio town, Emma never knew what it felt like to be the center of someone's world. Her father, Mark, tried for a time, or so she believed. But sorrow aged him early, his warmth faded into duty. Then, when Emma was just 6, Diane came into their lives. A woman with a plastic smile, a firm handshake, and an ambitious heart. Diane had no children of her own, yet Emma was her trial run. At first, things were sweet. Diane dressed Emma up like a little doll. Neighbors thought they were adorable, a picture-perfect blended family. But behind closed doors, Emma learned a different truth. The attention Diane gave her was fleeting, conditional, performance-based. When Diane had her own children, a daughter, then a son, Emma's place in the house shifted quietly, but unmistakably. She was no longer a daughter, she was a helper. A background character in a household that had already cast its stars. Diane became a full-time mother to her own children. Emma, she became a full-time shadow. While other kids spent their weekends playing or going to birthday parties, Emma spent hers cleaning up toys she didn't play with, washing dishes she hadn't eaten off, and babysitting siblings who screamed louder and loved harder than she ever dared to. Her father, now completely emotionally outsourced to Diane, offered only nods and distracted MMHMs. She could ace a math test or get perfect attendance, no one noticed. But if the living room was messy, if her little brother cried for 2 minutes too long, suddenly everyone had something to say. It's a strange thing, growing up in a house where your presence feels optional, where your voice carries no weight, where the walls remember your missteps louder than your milestones. Emma became a master at invisibility. She learned when to stay quiet, when to smile without feeling, when to retreat before being dismissed. Her childhood was a silent training ground in learning how to shrink. And yet, a part of her refused to fully disappear. At night, lying in her small twin bed wedged in the narrowest room of the house, she dreamed, not of princes or parties but of escape. Of walking across a college campus with purpose, of sipping coffee in her own apartment. Of being seen, truly seen by someone who wouldn't just pass her by, someone who'd hear her even when she whispered. But those dreams, as comforting as they were, always came with a cost. Because deep down, Emma knew the truth. If she was ever going to make it out of that house, she'd have to do it alone. No inheritance, no helping hand, no, we're proud of you. She didn't even hope for that anymore. By 9th grade, she made her decision. She wouldn't stay in this place past graduation. She didn't even fantasize about a university, just a teaching certificate. A small job, a modest apartment, anything that would be hers. She buckled down in school, caught up from years of academic neglect, and studied late into the night at the local library, one of the few places where silence didn't hurt. In those dim aisles between math textbooks and storybooks, Emma began quietly laying the bricks of a life no one else would build for her, and that's where the real story begins. Not the part where she fell in love, not even the heartbreak later on. But here, in the loneliness of a forgotten daughter, fighting tooth and nail not to disappear. That was the beginning of Emma Carter's journey, a story not about tragedy, but about choosing not to be defined by it. You see, many people will sympathize with the girl left behind, but fewer will understand the strength it takes to keep showing up day after day in a home where you are seen only when needed, heard only when scolded, and loved only on borrowed terms. That's the wound Emma carried into womanhood. A wound that shaped her choices, her relationships, her tolerance for pain, and ultimately, her transformation. And if you think this story is just about survival, you're mistaken. This is about reclamation. If you're still here, it means something in Emma's story echoed in you. Maybe it stirred a memory. Maybe it whispered a truth you haven't dared to speak. So don't miss what comes next because Emma's journey is only getting started. And trust me, what's waiting at the end will surprise you. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapter. It's time we tell stories that don't just entertain, but heal. And now, a question for you on that Emma never stopped asking herself as a child. If you grew up in a house where love had to be earned, what do you believe now? A love must still be proven to be kept. B, love should be unconditional because anything else is control. Drop your answer in the comments. Or B, I want to hear your thoughts. When Emma Carter finally left that house, she didn't look back. There was no tearful goodbye, no last-minute hug from her father, no whispered well wishes from the woman who had raised her like a burden. Just a small suitcase, a bus ticket to Cleveland, and the quiet resolve of a girl who had learned to survive on the edge of love. Freedom didn't feel like fireworks or a victory march. It felt like an old, creaky room in a shared apartment on the wrong side of town, one light bulb to locks, and peeling wallpaper that smelled of time, but to Emma, it was sacred. For the first time in her life, every square inch of that space belonged to her. No one could barge in, no one could shame her into silence. She could finally breathe. She enrolled in a 2-year teaching certification program at a local college. The plan was simple: work, study, survive. Her mornings started with early shifts at Linda's Diner, a crowded, greasy spoon known for its bottomless coffee and rotating staff. Emma was quiet, efficient, and always polite. Linda liked her immediately. Said she had eyes that had seen too much and hands that never stopped moving. Emma took the compliment as a warning. Don't stop, don't slow down, or life will run you over. It wasn't glamorous, long shifts on her feet, minimum wage, occasional drunk customers, and aching legs that pulsed through her classes at night. But somehow Emma managed. She even began to enjoy the rhythm of her days, the clink of dishes, the smell of strong coffee, the predictable chaos of the diner. It was, oddly, less exhausting than the emotional landmines of her childhood home. And then one evening, after a particularly brutal double shift, he walked in. Ryan Brooks didn't enter with a bang. He wasn't loud or showy. But there was something about the way he stood tall, relaxed, like someone who wasn't afraid of being noticed. He had soft, wavy hair, dark eyes that danced when he smiled, and a voice that wrapped around Emma like a song she didn't know she needed. "You look like you've been through war," he said with a playful grin as she struggled to carry a stack of trays. She didn't laugh, not at first. But there was warmth in his voice, not mockery. He offered to help. Most men didn't. Emma, exhausted and sore, accepted. That's how it began, not with a love story. With clean-up duty. Ryan was different. Or at least, he seemed to be. He talked about his dreams, working in finance, moving up in the world, proving something to his overbearing mother. He'd just graduated from university, still lived with Karen, but claimed it was temporary. "She's always controlling everything," he'd sigh. "But I'm ready to be on my own now." Emma believed him. She wanted to. He showed up every day after work, helped her close the diner, brought her flowers wrapped in newspaper, told her she was beautiful even when she was sweaty and worn out. For a girl who had grown up fighting for scraps of affection, it felt like a feast. Soon, he started staying over, then slowly, his toothbrush appeared. Then a drawer, then half the closet. One morning, he never left. Emma didn't protest. She liked the idea of waking up with someone, of cooking for someone, of not being alone. It didn't even bother her that she paid the rent, covered most of the groceries, and bought the toilet paper. "This is just the beginning," Ryan always said. "I'm building my future, babe. Once I get some experience, we'll be fine." She wanted to believe that too, and for a while, it was enough. But time has a cruel way of revealing character. Ryan didn't chase better jobs. He complained about them, said he was underqualified, said the world was unfair. He stayed in his low-paying role, talked big, and spent what little he had on beers with his friends or gym memberships to maintain the body that turned heads. Emma worked double shifts, made meal plans around canned soup, and still managed to ace her practicum placements. Her professors said she had a gift for working with children, that her patience, her empathy, her clarity, those couldn't be taught. But at home, none of that mattered. Ryan rarely asked about her day. When he did, he seemed bored by the answer. He wasn't cruel, not overtly, he just didn't carry anything. Not the weight of bills, not the pressure of planning, not the emotional labor of partnership. He floated while Emma held everything together. Friends and co-workers started dropping hints. Don't you think you're doing a bit too much for a guy who doesn't even pay the water bill? You sure he's looking for a better job or just a better ride? Emma brushed them off, said Ryan was just going through a phase. That love meant patience, that she understood him. What she didn't admit was the fear. The fear of being alone again, of losing even the illusion of intimacy. Of proving, once more, that she was someone easy to leave behind. She clung to Ryan the way some people cling to a ship that's already taken on water because the idea of drowning without it is more terrifying than going down with it. But life has a way of forcing your hand. One night, after another long shift, Emma came home to a dark apartment and an empty fridge. Ryan was out again, the note said, with the guys. Don't wait up. Her feet ached, her chest felt hollow. And as she sat alone in the too-quiet room, something shifted. She thought about her mother, the one she never knew. She thought about her father, the one who never saw her. She thought about Diane, the woman who loved conditionally. And Ryan, the man who said all the right things, but never followed through. Emma realized she had built her adulthood on the same foundation as her childhood, carrying people, hoping they'd love her back. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop waiting. This wasn't rock bottom, not yet. But it was the beginning of the descent, and still she stayed. Because love, even in its most hollow form, is hard to walk away from when you've been starving your whole life. In the next chapter, Emma will have to make choices no woman should have to make alone about motherhood, marriage, and what it means to be enough for herself. But that part of the story we'll save for next time. It's easy to believe love is enough until life demands more than feelings. By the time Emma realized she was pregnant, her world was already teetering on a fragile edge. There were no screams of joy, no romantic late-night planning sessions over baby names. Just a quiet, breathless moment in the bathroom of their small apartment, to lines on a cheap plastic stick, and 100 fears rushing in like a flood. Ryan was surprisingly thrilled. He held her hands, kissed her forehead, told her he had always dreamed of having a child. He spoke of fatherhood as if it were the finish line of some emotional marathon he'd always longed to run. Emma wanted to believe him. She needed to believe that maybe, finally, this would be the chapter where things turned. But parenthood doesn't rewrite the past, it magnifies it. Emma had to leave her job at the diner earlier than expected. The pregnancy was more difficult than she imagined. Constant fatigue, back pain, dizzy spells. The doctor warned her to slow down. There were early signs of preeclampsia, and standing for hours was out of the question. With her income gone, the little savings she had tucked away for emergencies began to vanish like steam. Rent, prenatal vitamins, checkups, utilities. It was a slow, brutal bleed. Ryan's job, still the same low-paying one he'd taken straight out of college, didn't change. He said he was applying for better positions, but nothing ever came of it. It's just not the right time, he'd mutter, or they're asking for too much experience. Meanwhile, he still went out every weekend, still paid for his gym membership, still returned home smelling faintly of cologne and beer. Emma didn't ask questions, she didn't want the answers. As her belly grew, so did her isolation. She was home all day, restless but exhausted, worried about money, worried about the baby, and more than anything wondering if she was about to bring a child into a house that wasn't really a home. She missed touch, not sexual, but comforting. The hand on her back, the brush of fingers across her arm. Ryan barely looked at her anymore. He said her face had changed, that she looked tired. That pregnancy wasn't as cute as he expected. He joked about her swollen feet, her breakouts, her cravings. But behind the humor, Emma heard something called a detachment. One night, she called him while he was out. She could hear laughter in the background. And then, unmistakably, a woman's voice, flirty, intimate. When she asked who it was, he laughed it off. You're being paranoid, hormones. Maybe she was. But deep inside, a quiet, familiar ache was settling into her chest. The ache of knowing she was no longer enough. Still, she clung to hope. The baby, she thought, would bring them closer. She imagined holding their child in her arms and seeing Ryan's face soften, imagined the three of them walking in the park, taking turns pushing the stroller. She painted scenes of joy over the cracks in their foundation, hoping the colours would hold. When their daughter was born early, but healthy, Emma felt a kind of love she hadn't known existed. Sophie was tiny and loud, with big searching eyes that seemed to already understand her mother's pain. Emma held her for hours, weeping not from fear, but from something deeper. She had created life, she had built something beautiful from nothing. For a brief moment, it felt like magic. Ryan arrived at the hospital with flowers and balloons. He held Sophie gently and told Emma he was proud of her. Karen even visited, dropping off an expensive diaper bag and baby clothes. She didn't say much, but for once, her eyes were soft. It didn't last. Back home, Sophie's cries filled the small apartment day and night. Emma was constantly breastfeeding, rocking, changing, and cleaning. Her body was sore, her mind fogged from sleep deprivation. Ryan, claiming exhaustion from work, began sleeping on the couch. Then, some nights, he didn't come home at all. "I need space," he said once. "The baby's screaming is driving me insane. I can't function like this." Emma didn't argue, she simply nodded, holding back tears, telling herself that maybe he just needed time to adjust. Maybe things would settle down. But things didn't settle, they unraveled. He stopped buying groceries, stopped checking in. Emma began to sell small items, online, books, clothes, anything to make ends meet. Sophie was colicky, and Emma, running on fumes, would often break down in the bathroom just to let herself cry without waking the baby. There were nights she'd sit on the couch, staring at the door, willing Ryan to walk through it with takeout and a smile, saying, "Let me hold her. You go take a nap." But he never did. When he finally told her he was staying at his mom's for a while, she knew it wasn't just his mom. Something in his eyes said he had already gone. His body was still in the room, but his heart had long since left. The truth came days later, via social media. A photo, Ryan on a beach, cocktail in hand, next to a woman who looked like she walked out of a luxury magazine ad, Jeanette, a finance executive. 10 years older, no baby spit up on her shoulder, no dark circles under her eyes. Just perfection. Emma stared at the image in disbelief, her hand tightening around her phone until her knuckles turned white. He had moved on, not just physically but with joy. And she was still here, in a cramped apartment, with a crying infant and a fridge that hummed louder than the silence in the room. She didn't call him, she didn't beg. But she did fall apart, because being left is one kind of pain. But being left at your weakest while cradling a baby, with no family to turn to, no money in the bank, no one knocking on your door to check if you've eaten, is something else entirely. That's not heartbreak, that's abandonment. Emma would later say that the worst part wasn't even losing him, it was realizing that she had built her life around someone who never saw her as a partner. She had mistaken presence for commitment, affection for loyalty. It was a harsh truth. But it wouldn't break her. Because what Emma didn't know yet, what was waiting just around the corner, was that sometimes being left behind isn't a punishment, it's an open door. And soon, that door would lead her somewhere she never expected. Somewhere better, but first, she had to survive this. The day Karen Brooks showed up at Emma's door was not marked by any grand gesture. There were no apologies, no dramatic speeches. Just the sound of hesitant knocking, and the weight of an unexpected kindness standing in the hallway. Emma, holding baby Sophie on one hip, opened the door to find her mother-in-law, formally distant, proper, cold, standing with a canvas tote bag and tired eyes. It was the first time Karen had ever come to the apartment. She looked around briefly, taking in the peeling paint, the pile of unopened bills, the soft cries of her granddaughter. Then, quietly, she said, "You and Sophie should come stay with me for a while. It's not much, but it's stable." Emma didn't speak right away. She hadn't expected help from anyone, let alone the woman who had once cautioned her son not to marry a girl like her, too simple, too poor, too alone. But Emma also knew better than to question a lifeline when it was thrown. That night, she packed what little she had, a few clothes, baby formula, and Sophie's favorite blanket. Karen's home was quiet, neat, and emotionally distant like the woman herself, but she gave Emma the largest room in the house, with windows that opened to a patch of garden. It smelled like lavender and old books, and for the first time in weeks, Emma exhaled without trembling. Karen didn't talk much, she didn't ask invasive questions or try to make up for lost time. But she bought diapers, she prepared dinner. And when Sophie cried endlessly into the night, she would sometimes knock on the door, wordlessly take the baby from Emma's arms, and pace the whole way until Sophie calmed. Emma couldn't name the relationship between them. It wasn't affection, not yet, it wasn't comfort. But it was something rare in Emma's world, quiet, consistent presence. She learned that Karen's health was fragile. A recent heart surgery had slowed her down. There were days when she could barely walk without wincing. Emma began helping more cooking, cleaning, caring for both Sophie and the house. It felt like a trade, not money for shelter, but effort for dignity. And in the silence between them, something small began to grow, respect, but respect couldn't pay bills. The child support Ryan sent when he sent it was barely enough to cover Sophie's formula. Emma applied to dozens of jobs, but no school would hire a new teacher who couldn't commit to full-time hours. And Sophie, still so young and often ill, couldn't be left with strangers. Emma felt the walls closing in again, even in safety. She was stuck. Then one afternoon, while walking Sophie around the block, she met a neighbor named Eleanor. A warm woman in her 60s, with silver curls and the confident tone of someone used to solving problems. They spoke briefly about motherhood, exhaustion, and how expensive childcare had become. Eleanor said something in passing, "My granddaughter just started school, and they had to hire a nanny who's on maternity leave herself. She watches both kids, and they pay her well. You should consider it." That night, Emma couldn't sleep. The idea swirled in her mind. What if I stopped looking for the job I was trained for and found the job I could actually do? She posted an ad. Young mother with teaching degree available for part-time nanny work. Loving, responsible, patient, it was simple, honest. Within days, she received dozens of responses, most led nowhere. Some families didn't want a nanny with a baby in tow, others lived too far. A few expected round-the-clock help for almost nothing. Emma tried not to be discouraged, but hope, once ignited, is hard to silence. Then came the call that would change her life. A woman named Ella introduced herself. She wasn't the mother, she explained, but the housekeeper. She worked for a man who had lost his wife 2 years ago and was helping raise his young son Logan, 4 years old, quiet, emotionally withdrawn. They had tried several nannies, but the boy wouldn't speak to them, wouldn't play, wouldn't even look them in the eye. "I know it's unusual," Ella said, "but we're desperate. And if you have your own little one, maybe that's not a problem." "Maybe. It's exactly what he needs," Emma agreed to visit. She still remembers the first time she saw the house large, white-bricked, elegant but not showy. The front yard was manicured, but not artificial. There was something lived in about it, something tired. Logan was sitting on the living room floor when they entered. Small, pale, with intelligent but guarded eyes, Ella introduced them softly. "This is Miss Emma, and this is her baby, Sophie." Logan didn't respond, he barely glanced up. But when Sophie, ever curious, reached out a hand and cooed, something happened. Logan moved closer, just a step, then he touched her hand gently, almost reverently. A faint smile tugged at the corner of his lips. Ella gasped, "That's the first time I've seen him smile in months." That moment sealed it. Emma began working there the next week. Every morning, a car picked her up. She and Sophie would spend the day with Logan playing, reading, walking through the garden. Emma didn't try to be a therapist. She didn't push. She simply offered presence, softness, stability. Something in her understood him deeply. She, too, had once learned how to protect herself by going silent. Logan opened slowly. He followed Emma like a shadow. He kissed Sophie on the forehead. He began asking questions quietly, then constantly. His laughter returned in bursts, surprising everyone. It wasn't magic. It was love, uncomplicated and unforced. Emma thrived, too. For the first time in years, she felt useful. Not just surviving, but shaping something good. Ella became a friend. The house, once foreign, started feeling familiar, safe. And the man behind it all, Logan's father. She hadn't met him yet. He was busy, always working. But his presence lingered in the house, in the stories Ella told, in the care with which the home had been kept. She didn't expect what would happen next. But that's how lifelines work. You don't see them coming. You just have to be brave enough to grab on when they appear. And Emma, battered, tired, quietly hopeful, was finally ready to hold on. Emma met Daniel Miller on a rainy Tuesday morning, though she didn't know it yet. She had just arrived at the house, umbrella dripping, baby Sophie pressed against her chest, and Logan holding her other hand. The boy, now 5, had slowly become her little shadow, curious, gentle, and blossoming with each passing day. Daniel was standing in the hallway, freshly returned from a business trip. He looked nothing like what Emma had imagined. She had pictured someone stiff, older, probably too busy to remember birthdays. Instead, he was disarmingly young, soft-spoken, dressed simply in a dark sweater and jeans, with tired eyes that smiled before his lips did. "You must be Emma," he said, offering his hand. "I've heard ... a lot." She braced herself for formality, maybe judgment. But Daniel wasn't interested in interviews or hierarchy. He looked at Logan, then at Sophie, then back at her. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I don't know what you've done, but my son, he's different, lighter, happier." Emma had learned not to absorb compliments too quickly. They often came with conditions, but Daniel's gratitude felt steady, unembellished. It landed gently and stayed. Their relationship unfolded in glances first. She would arrive in the morning as he left for the office, sometimes exchanging a few words in the foyer, sometimes just a smile. Then weekends came, mornings when Daniel stayed home, lingering in the kitchen with coffee, watching the children play. He was cautious, always respectful, never overstepping. Emma wasn't looking for love. She was still rebuilding her finances, her confidence, her sense of worth. Romance wasn't part of the plan, but connection doesn't always ask permission. It just shows up, quietly, until one day you realize it's been standing next to you the whole time. The turning point came one Saturday afternoon, when Sophie spiked a fever. Emma panicked. It wasn't her first time caring for a sick child, but something about the way Sophie curled into her, whimpering, frightened her. Daniel noticed. Without a word, he made calls: pediatrician, pharmacy, even soup from her favorite diner. He stayed up that night with them, reading stories to Logan and cooling Sophie's forehead with a damp cloth. When Emma finally sat down, emotionally drained, Daniel brought her tea and said, "You don't have to do this alone anymore." She didn't cry, though she wanted to. Instead, she nodded, and something shifted. Love, when it's real, doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It slips in quietly, setting down roots in the small gestures: staying up late, remembering how you take your tea, calling your child ours without hesitation. Their lives began to intertwine slowly. Logan adored Sophie like a little sister, and Emma became not just his nanny but his person. Daniel started coming home earlier, asking Emma about her day, bringing home little surprises: a book for Sophie, flowers for the kitchen, Logan's favorite puzzle set. They weren't a family yet, not officially, but they moved as one. Eventually, Daniel asked her out to dinner, not in a grand romantic sweep, but with a kind of humility. "I know it's complicated," he said. "You work here, and you've built so much with the kids. But I think we'd regret it if we never explored this." Emma said yes. Not because she was ready, but because for the first time she wasn't afraid. Their first few dates were clumsy, filled with laughter and shared stories about childhoods, mistakes, and how neither of them had planned for this version of their lives. Emma told him about Ryan, about the betrayal and the silence. Daniel opened up about his late wife, a woman he loved deeply, and how grief had dulled everything until Emma stepped into their home. "I thought I'd never feel alive again," he admitted one night, his voice barely audible over the rain tapping against the window. "But you brought light back." Their love wasn't young or naive. It was weathered, cautious, but honest. It had been tested before it began. Months later, Emma moved in. The house, once too big and too quiet, now echoed with laughter, toy clutter, and the chaos of real family life. She and Daniel married in a small ceremony in the garden. Logan walked her down the aisle. Sophie held the rings, and Karen sat in the front row, eyes glistening with a pride she never voiced but finally showed. Karen's health had begun to decline again. Emma visited often, bringing the kids, sitting with her through treatments. The once-scold woman, now softened by years and grandchildren, became a true anchor in Emma's life. She still wasn't overly affectionate, but she listened, helped, and loved in her own deliberate way. When Emma and Daniel welcomed their daughter Madeline into the world, the family felt whole. Logan, now older and steadier, became Sophie's protector and Madeline's biggest fan. Daniel learned how to braid hair. Emma, now a full-time mother and part-time tutor, rediscovered her love for teaching in the most personal of ways through her children. And then, years after he vanished, Ryan called. He had no idea how much Emma's life had changed. He didn't ask about Sophie's school or favorite color. He said something about doing the right thing, about checking in, but Emma heard the undertone, the pride, the assumption that she'd been waiting all this time, perhaps still struggling, still missing him. They met briefly. She let him talk. He tried to charm her, to offer an update about his new job, his travels, his expensive watch. But when she stood to leave, he stopped smiling. "Wait, you're really happy, aren't you?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. At home, the kids were waiting. Daniel had taken the day off, and the plan was pancakes and a movie marathon. Karen was coming over later to teach Logan her secret apple pie recipe. Emma stepped back into the house and took it all in: the smell of breakfast, the sound of giggles, the man who had loved her back to life. This wasn't the life she expected. It was better. In the quiet echoes of Emma Carter's journey, many of us see fragments of our own story: unspoken grief, quiet endurance, dreams that had to be shelved so others could breathe. Emma's life was not extraordinary in the way we often think of drama or glory. There were no headlines, no fairy godmothers. Just a woman who, over and over again, was given less than she deserved, and still chose to build something beautiful from it. What makes her story so powerful isn't just that she survived abandonment, betrayal, and emotional neglect. It's how she responded. She didn't let bitterness define her. She didn't pass her pain on to her children. She didn't spend her life demanding justice for the love she never received. Instead, Emma turned inward and then forward. She created the kind of love she'd been denied. She broke cycles, even while carrying the weight of them on her shoulders. Many of us carry silent wounds from our past childhoods where we felt like an afterthought, relationships where we gave more than we received, responsibilities we should never have been burdened with. It's tempting and understandable to let those wounds harden us, to build walls instead of bridges. But Emma reminds us of a deeper truth: that strength isn't just in holding on. Sometimes it's in how we let go, letting go of the idea that love must be earned. Letting go of the people who only stayed when it was convenient. Letting go of shame we were never meant to carry. And most of all, letting go of the belief that our past defines our capacity for joy. Emma didn't find happiness because someone rescued her. She wasn't saved by a man or a miracle. Her turning point came the day she chose to reach out instead of shut down. The day she accepted a hand extended by someone she didn't expect: her once distant mother-in-law. The day she walked into a house not knowing if she would be welcomed. The day she said yes to a boy named Logan who hadn't spoken in months and who, like her, just needed someone to stay. Her story is a testament to the power of quiet courage. The everyday bravery of single mothers, forgotten daughters, and women who rise in silence. It is about how healing often comes through unlikely people who weren't warm at first, who didn't say the right things, but who showed up and stayed. And it's also a story of redemption, not just romantic, but spiritual. Because when Emma met Daniel, she didn't meet a savior. She met someone who had also lost, who also knew grief, who didn't expect perfection but recognized the quiet beauty of a woman who had fought like hell to still be kind. That's what love is at its best: not a rescue, but a recognition. So what do we take from this? The lesson is this: your beginning does not dictate your ending. You are not the brokenness you came from. You are not the silence others placed upon you. And even if you were abandoned, misjudged, or overlooked, you still have the power to create something whole. How do we apply this today? Start by being honest about what shaped you, but don't let it confine you. Offer grace to yourself and to others. Say yes to small, unexpected doors that open. And perhaps most importantly, don't underestimate the impact of presence. Just being there as a friend, a parent, a neighbor can change someone's life. It changed Logan's. It changed Emma's. Maybe it can change yours too. Now, I'd love to ask you something simple. Have you ever experienced a moment when someone showed up for you, just when you needed it most, even if it was unexpected? Yes, and I still remember how it changed me. Be not yet, but I believe those people exist. Please share your answer in the comments. Just type OB and maybe a sentence or two if you'd like. Your words could inspire someone who's feeling alone today. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel. It lets us know these stories matter to you. And if you feel moved to support this work, even with a small donation, it would mean the world. I'm not a young man anymore, but I believe deeply in using the time I have left to do something meaningful for society, for the people who need to hear stories like Emma's. Every donation, every comment, every subscription helps keep this mission alive. Thank you for being here. Let's keep building something honest, something healing together.